Greetings and salutations, Internet Distance. This is Wolfphototech, and here we are with another delightful video. This time I'm going to cover Tal'Dorei, a campaign setting Reborn from Darrington Press / Critical Role. Just a few important small details. First and foremost, I'm not a big Critical Role fan. I'm not going to explain. But anyways, let's continue on from here. This is the newest version of the Tal'Dorei campaign setting book, as it simply states Reborn, as in it was a previous iteration. I do not own that copy. I did not bother acquiring that copy, and one of the major reasons why I'm going to cover this book is that it was recently added to D&D Beyond as a option to purchase. So this video also doubles as a D&D Beyond. If you don't own it already on D&D Beyond and you are curious, I'm going to give you a quick overview of this book. It appears to be a fairly thick book by most standards. However, that is simply largely due to the fact that Darrington Press went with the decision of using thicker paper in this book. So there's only about 280-ish pages. However, there's a lot of content within those 280-ish pages. A good 2/3 of the book are easily nothing but campaign setting material. Flip through the book quickly to get to that point. Look. Right here. About that much of the book is campaign setting stuff, which is actually probably like 60%. Yeah. So 60% of 280 pages is roughly the all campaign setting stuff. So if you're not going to run a campaign within Tal'Dorei, that 60% of pages of the 280 are not going to be exceedingly high value to you. It also comes with this fold-out poster. There's a nice little pocket right here for it. That's a nice feature in itself. The poster is fairly decent. It covers Tal'Dorei, and even has a nice little nod to Wildmount right over here. A little section right there. So there you go, Realm of Tal'Dorei. It's actually roughly in the style of a classic map from like the 16th century or 17th century kind of feel to it. There you go. They also are nice enough to include a ribbon in the book. So that is a nice little feature. However, it is, as typical of this day and age, the cheap style of ribbon, where there is no cross-stitching on the tip or no braiding. So if a single strand comes loose from this tip, it's going to unravel like nothing. If you want to see a good example of that, go check out my Call of Cthulhu Player's Handbook video. In that book, a string came loose and I just grabbed it impulsively. My autism spectrum kicked in, and I saw a dangling line, and I just had to pull it. And of course, I pulled it, and I'm like, oh shit, I pulled it, and I'm like, cut. Yeah, no, stop touching that. Bad. Okay, so there you go. We open up to the next page, which is the title page of this book, where you have the vestiges here on the cover, which is very interesting that they chose to put magic artifact magic items on the title page. One would naturally assume that you would want to stick your main characters or your important characters of the setting on that page, but they put magic items there. Interesting. You get over here to the credits, and you have all the nice little credits for all the people that worked on the book, but it also has a bit of credits right here, the first edition credits for the original book, which I might pick up later on in the future and do a, well, this is the changes between the two books kind of video. You have this nice little scene here with the special iconics that Darrington Press / Critical Role created for this book. You have the table of contents. This is what I would classify as a median tier table of contents. Median tier table of contents in juxtaposition to low tier and high tier table of contents. Low tier is literally like, oh, they list the chapters of the book. That's a low tier contents kind of book. It's like a storybook or something, like Into the Wild, and then Through the Woods, and Back to Civilization, Chapter 3. Chapter 4, A Great Tale of Great Imperil Comes Upon Us. Which you would think be Chapter 1, but, you know, sometimes you want to, like, start a new story leading off of what everyone thinks was the end. But anyways, a high tier table of contents is when they list out all the important information or where you can find it very quickly, like table 1-1, what is that, what page, diagram of such and such on page 262 or something like that. Monster stat block. The Great Gibbler is on 298. Or the Gobblegoo on 299. So there you go. Or little game mechanics or such and such. A median tier table of contents simply has the title of the chapter and all the important sections in that chapter. A good example of a high tier, I have to pull this down. A high tier table of contents can be found in the DM layers. There's Layers and Legends, where they systematically listed out everything that's in the book in the table of contents. So you don't just have chapter, you don't have just parts, you have sub-chapters and sub-subchapters, and each individual special thing that's tied into that listed out in the book. So if you ever get lost and you need to find something in the DM layer books, bam! There's no problem finding it. You just have to go to the table of contents and everything is there. Where a median tier just simply lists out the basic stuff. You have a nice handy-dandy preface by Matthew Mercer. Each chapter, as a typical, will start with chapter 1 and with a big piece of full-page artwork on the other side. And as I stated before, this book covers is about say 60% and setting stuff. But as we can go quickly through this, chapter 1 is Welcome to Tal'Dorei, and it basically gives you the basic overview of important details like what's in this book, calendar, time, and cosmos, a history of Tal'Dorei, myth of Alexandria, running a Tal'Dorei campaign, and then chapter 2 is allegiances of Tal'Dorei, the pantheon, factions and societies, and then it lists out all those little, the Tal'Dorei Council, Arcana Philosophical, or the Asari, the Brawlers League. Chapter 3 is the Tal'Dorei Gazetter, which basically points out important regions throughout the book. And then once you get to chapter 4, that is where the character options are. And then chapter 5 is Game Master stuff. And chapter 6 is Allies and Adversaries of Tal'Dorei. So there you go. So I'm going to just jump all the way to chapter 4 because everything from chapter 1, 2, and 3 is setting stuff. And as you can see, there is, as I quickly flip through chapter 1, 2, and 3, a good chunk of it is some maps of important cities, symbols of deities, little maps of regions. important events in the history of Tal'Dorei in relationship to those areas, and so forth. And if I get all the way over here to where you have Chapter 4, which starts with the various ancestries in Tal'Dorei, along with some advice on a few things and references, full page splash. And then we jump back over here to the beginning of the character creation section. All this stuff this way is basically setting oriented. Right here, for whatever reason, they have a nice little section with the word subclasses here, and they immediately started it into barbarian. It is important to note that there are only subclasses in this book for barbarian, bard, cleric, druid, monk, paladin, sorcerer, and wizard. So if you are a artificer fan, a fighter fan, rogue, ranger, I know I put the rogue and ranger out of order, but you know, everyone kind of wants to do that, except for those that are compelled to do alphabetical. And then you have warlock. So one of my game masters in my group has literally nothing in this book he would want because he loves warlocks and rangers. Interestingly, my main group that I'm in is entirely nothing but game masters. So everyone has their own little style of preference. You got, for the barbarian, you got the Path of the Juggernaut, which largely is about hitting really hard and throwing things around. You got College of Tragedy, which is really interesting when you read it over, but it has this weird, like, making your enemies confess or say something bold in a moment and then granting advantage off of that and stuff like that. Then you have two subclasses for cleric, which is the blood domain and the moon domain, which is interesting in itself. One is the boost to cantrips, one is the boost to physical attacks. Then the druid has the blighted domain, which is interesting in itself, which you get a little pet of. Then you have the monk cobalt soul. Personally, I do not agree whatsoever about the setup of monk cobalt soul. I'm really big into monks, and I just don't really care for how it operates. At some point, I might want to make my own knowledge monk. And then you have Paladin of the Seas in here, and the Runechild Sorcerer, and the Blood Magic Wizard. Now, there's a interesting little small note here. In the case of the Sorcerer, it is that they have 2 new spells in this book. Yeah. So you got Freedom of Winds and Freedom of Waves in this book. After the Wizard, you happen to get some new backgrounds, which adds a few new nice options to your list of backgrounds. Nothing super amazing with the backgrounds. They're just a nice addition to everything you need to run your campaigns. There are, here in this book, I'm getting in here, some supernatural blessings, which is not terribly big. It's just 2 examples. And then you have some new feats, like the Cruel Feat, the Flash Recall, the Mystic Conflux, Remarkable Recovery, Spell Driver, Throne Arms Master, Vital Sacrifice, and that's it. I do have to say that these feats are really interestingly constructed. Several of them have a lot of prerequisites that are tied into them, so you have to play like specifically a spellcaster or a melee oriented character. The Cruel Feat adds extra damage and effect to your rolls, and the Vital Sacrifice feat, it gives you some boosts to your character if you do certain things. I'm not going to go too far into that. I'll make another video if someone wants that specifically. Then you have the Game Master's Toolkit, which is in itself actually fairly basic. It's a fairly short section just before the magic items. Like, magic items is right here. So you basically got a page and a quarter of Game Master tools. It's just really loose advice. Ultra basic stuff to... It's advice that you would give to someone that's a level 0 DM or GM that has literally no experience. And once you play a few games, you basically understand the point of the advice. You have a very nice mixture of magic items. I do have to say that this is probably the high point of this entire book, is that there are numerous really nice magic items in this book that adds a whole crazy range of new options. You got a lot of different boots. Like, right off the bat, in the beginning of this book, there's 2 different boots here. Boots of Haste and Boots of Vigilant. Boots of Haste basically Boots of Haste basically grants you haste minus the lethargy after it has been broken or runs out. Boots of Vigilant basically gets you an alert. Boots of Stormrider are rather interesting in themselves. They grant you a flying speed of 90 feet. So you have a whole bunch of crazy things. There's a lot of water-oriented themed magic items, earth-themed, and flying-themed magic in this book. And then you go right into the Vestiges of Deliverance. With the standard for Critical Role, Dormant, Awakened, and Exalted effect. These items are actually rather interesting in themselves, but are not entirely clear how they operate in full effect, because the writing is not 100% clear on them as effectively. It's one of those cases where you probably have to read them very carefully, and any important notes at the beginning, and then it makes sense. But you also get a nice magic item for monks here too. Wraps of Dymark. And then you've got special rules back here on Accelerated Rests, Arduous Rally, Alternative Resurrection Rules, Hurrying Returnings, and so forth. Fading Spirits, Taxing Return, Rapid Quaffing. And then you have the monster section, or the character section, where it comes over the various creatures of the world, like Fae, Driders, Dragons, etc. So you understand how they are like in Tal'Dorei. Then you get into the stat box of the various creatures of Tal'Dorei. And this is actually a fairly nice collection in itself, with a large favor towards humanoids in itself. So you get a lot of humanoids in this book, which kind of makes sense, and in the sense that Critical Role is very actor-oriented or talky social-oriented. So if you prefer to have your campaigns be more social-oriented with a few large spikes in combat and some interesting creatures thrown in, there you go. There are options in this book. It does slightly favor humanoids. Most of the humanoids in this book are not terribly high CR, mostly sticking around on 15 and below. And then as we continue on here, centaur skeletons are actually kind of neat. I will actually probably use one of those in the future. But as we get here, we get to Vox Machina characters and all their stats and skills, and a little bit of information on what they're up to. You have a nice little index back here, so just in case you want to look up something in the book, you can do so. However, this is not a really deep index. And then you happen to have a nice index of artists in the book with some examples of variations. Two characters of two iconic characters. There's in their slight variations. And then you got the OGL back here. So let's give this one last throw through. This book is more strongly favoring the dungeon master or game master in the campaigns. Basically, 80% of the content is oriented towards the game master, and it is roughly around, say, if you don't care about campaign setting, but you just want to use the items and monsters and all that other fun stuff, it is a solid right around that 4-star territory. You do have a nice variety of monsters. You get a really good collection of magic items in here. You get some new ideas for mechanics out of this book as well. Same thing basically ties in if you want to use the setting, it's still a 4-star. For a player, on the other hand, you don't have all the classes. You don't have anything for fighter. You have nothing for ranger, rogue. You have nothing for artificer. You have nothing for the awesome warlock in this book. So from there, you have an incomplete list of character classes. You don't even have anything for the blood hunter. So this is a quick list with my terrible handwriting. The top list is the classes that are in this book, and the bottom list are classes that are missing stuff from this book. So it is basically a 3.5 star book for players. If you've already purchased all the core rule books, like Zathar's Guide to Everything, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Player's Handbook, all those other books that have all those other classes in it, those big ones, then you pretty much are left with going to this book right off the bat. There's only a few other books officially from Wizards of the Coast that might have like 1 or 2 subclasses, which you might put after this. However, being that this is an unofficial product and not an official product by Wizards of the Coast, some dungeon masters do not allow for third-party content in their campaigns without having it directly come across their table and them being able to read it out themselves. However, the fact that this is now included on the DM, I was about to say DM's Guild, but it's now included on D&D Beyond. More dungeon masters will have access to this, and they could choose to purchase it. When it was first released on DM's Guild, it was like $29. I do not know if that's going to change in pricing in the future. However, not DM's Guild. Why do I keep saying DM's Guild? Or why do I keep thinking DM's Guild? A place that I would hardly ever want to sparsely ever touch for content. But anyways, it sells on the it leases on the D&D Beyond store for $29.99 if I remember correctly. It MSRPs in retail for $49.99, which is actually still a pretty decent deal and why it's a solid purchase. If it was like $60, it might knock off a 0.25 of a star, just because that's starting to get expensive. And at that point, I would kind of want, I want a fighter subclass, I want a rogue subclass, I want a warlock subclass, I would really like a ranger subclass in this book as well if we're getting into that $60 range. Because at that point, you definitely want to have something for every of the core class, and it would have been nice to have Blood Hunter included in this book. I don't know why it's not included in this book, but it should have been included in this book. But yeah, so there you go. So it's like basically 4 stars for the Dungeon Master and 3.5 stars for players. You do get some good feats, players, and you do get some added backgrounds and more classes, which is a good all-around collection of things you gain. You don't have all the classes. However, as being this is a third-party product, I have to remind you again, you have to ask permission of your dungeon master and show them said item before you incorporate any of that stuff into your character. And if the dungeon master says no, just let it be. Please, just let it be, okay? So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please share it around. And leave a like on the video. If you dislike the video, hit a dislike. And tell me why in the comments below. If there's anything you want me to cover specifically or read through in this book, just leave a comment below in the comments. However, you can always just check out D&D Beyond for such things. At some point in the future, this is an overview video. This is the scores I have given are preliminary scores. Preliminary is in the terms that I have not played all the stuff. I have not had players use the stuff, and I have not had opportunity to incorporate a great deal of many of the stuff into a game. So I do not truly know exactly how it's all going to work out. I just know approximately, based on my personal experience dungeon mastering and having been in many games, what kind of things that would occur when you introduce certain things. So there you go. That reminded me of a small point. A good many of the mechanics of the bard in this book and a few other mechanics in various other subclasses have a social character interaction element, player interaction element. Like you state some kind of revelation, or you have a flash of through your past life or something like that. That kind of mechanic can sometimes bother players, and other times it can amplify things greatly. If you do not like to have your character being pushed through a behavior pattern of like, you say something of tragic, you are forced to role play by saying something incredibly tragic when your character falls or something like that, then the scores drop up by a whole entire star. Because there is a bit of that in this book. And some players, they love it. In other times, when you use an ability that forces a player to do a specific social talky kind of component to the game as a requirement, then it immediately ruins the game for them. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching. Have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful weekend, a magnificent month, and see you next time. Ciao.